No, you're McDonald, Linda McDonald.
Yeah,
sorry.
I am.
You're on
Yep.
right now, I believe. Yeah. You're on right now, eh?
Yeah, they are. And my report. I think he got it. I think he just watched it first. He's doing his own thing.
Lots of people.
That's good.
Gio? It's not George, it's Gio.
Certainly, that would be great. Would you like some water?
Is he right here? Yeah.
I think so.
She said no. I said to Marie, I brought my own.
Yeah, I have my own too. I have my own too.
Would you care for some water?
Good crowd.
Around.
Crowd. Do we stand up? Do we just
My
stay
daughter
sitting? What do we do? I think we stay
Went through the whole
sitting.
family, so we're waiting.
I'll be glad to do that.
Would you, I can introduce you, you just raise your hands.
Larry's going to introduce us. We just raise our hands. Yeah.
Because you don't each have a microphone.
Good.
Very nice.
This is nice.
That's okay. It's Gio McLean. It's Gio McLean. Is that the name of the kid? Gio McLean?
Yes, it's just down there. That's what Gail said. It's the gentleman with the beard. I have no idea. She was talking to him. She told me his name is Gio.
Okay.
They can hear us.
Good afternoon. I wonder if we could come to order now, please. Can everybody hear? I'll try to keep, we have to be mindful of keeping the microphones close when we speak. Welcome this afternoon, everyone. It is good to see this many people here, this many seniors here. It is a rare opportunity to be able to come and listen to candidates in a federal election. It's a real privilege. And I know that we're going to enjoy the afternoon. Let me introduce myself. My name is Larry Whalen. I'm a recently retired Superior Court judge. I haven't been able to be at one of these kinds of meetings for 27 years because it was not permitted. So it is a real pleasure to be here today. This afternoon is sponsored by three local seniors organizations: the National Association of Federal Retirees, of course I'm a member of that one, having retired recently, the District 3 Algoma of the Retired Teachers of Ontario, and the Sault Ste. Marie and Algoma Seniors Health Advisory Committee. The focus of this afternoon's meeting is seniors issues. The organizing groups have identified 4 topics: prioritizing pharmacare, making retirement income more secure, implementing a national senior strategy, and addressing the climate crisis. Just a few housekeeping matters before we begin. If you need a washroom, just go right out through the doors you came in and look to your right or left and told they're right there. So they won't be hard to find. Secondly, if I could ask, please, that you turn your cell phones off or put them on airplane mode so that we don't have beeping and buzzing. And of course, being the good Canadians we are going to be very polite and respectful. That way we will hear more and learn more in a more disciplined way. The candidates and the sponsoring organizations have put materials, pamphlets and reading materials on tables that are right at the back over towards the right, at least my right that I'm pointing at. So feel free to take a look at those and to take some materials. Now, let me explain the process. There will be 5 questions posed by representatives of the 3 sponsoring groups. And the candidates will have a minute, up to a minute and a half to respond. There's a timekeeper. I'm not sure where the timekeeper is. Right there, okay. She's the person to be afraid of, not me. She will indicate when there are 15 seconds left for the candidates with their responses. And when the candidates hear that warning, they should be thinking of closing down, wrapping up a sentence. Then there will be a bell will ring. Must be a teacher, eh? She's probably got a ruler there to wrap knuckles. Good. Well, I got to tell you, I fear for myself more than the candidates. I'm the newbie here. So when the bell is rung, you should be on your last words. And if you aren't, I'll interrupt you politely, and somebody may even turn your microphone off politely. I'm sure that won't be a problem because the candidates are used to this now. I'm sure they've got little clocks that run in their heads. And after the prepared questions, the audience will be invited to ask questions, and we'll do that for 15 minutes. Then each candidate will have a minute and a half for closing remarks. And after that, people are welcome and encouraged to stay for refreshments and to meet with the candidates and chat and so on. Now, the questions are going to be on my left, and I will introduce them. On the far left is Ms. Myra Piritanimi of the she's the chair of the Sault Ste. Marie and Algoma Seniors Health Advisory Committee. And sitting beside her in the middle is Ms. Kathy Greening, the first Vice President and Secretary of the Retired Teachers of Ontario. And then right immediately to my right is Ms. Linda McDonald, who is a Director of the Board of the National Association of Federal Retirees. Now, I have the privilege of introducing the candidates. They may be well known to you already, but I'm going to enjoy the pleasure of introducing them anyway. And they are sitting in the order in which they will start answering questions. So to my far right, I welcome Ms. Sarah McClary of the New Democratic Party of Canada. And immediately to her left is Mr. Sonny Spina of the Conservative Party of Canada. And then Gio McLean of the Green Party of Canada. And next to Mr. McLean is Terry Sheehan, the Liberal Party of Canada. And next to him, to my immediate right, is Ms. Amy Zaccato of the People's Party of Canada. Now, how this is going to work is that the first question will be given to Ms. McCleary. And she'll have her minute and a half, and then we'll go down the line, each candidate, until we get to the end. And then the second question will go to Mr. Spina, and down the line, and ending with Ms. McCleary, and then so on. I think it's simple. Those are famous last words, by the way. So, I guess we can start with the panels. And I'm not sure who has the first question.
I do. Can you hear me? Okay, good. The first question will deal with pharmacare. All Canadians should have access to the medications they need. A universal, public, comprehensive, accessible, and portable national pharmacare program would cut costs, saving between $4 and $11 billion annually, and lead to a healthier population. Canadians pay among the highest prices for medications. 1 in 10 Canadians does not have adequate drug coverage, and 1 in 4 households cannot afford their prescriptions. A universal public pharmacare program would help Canadians manage their drug costs, allow for better evaluation of the effectiveness and safety of medications, and reduce hospital overcrowding and strains on other parts of our health system. The question: how will your party implement a universal, public, comprehensive, accessible, and portable pharmacare program and ensure that federal and provincial governments work together effectively to implement it?
Ms. McCleary.
I don't need to move this? I'm good?
Yeah, would you maybe move it in
bit?
right close?
Okay.
Right close.
Very close? Okay, there we go.
That's it.
Perfect. So thank you so much for the question, and to everybody for organizing this and everybody for coming out. It's part of that question says 1 in 4 Canadian households can't afford their prescriptions, and my household's actually one of them. My husband recently lost his benefits, and he went 3 months without one of his diabetes medications because we just couldn't fit it into our budget. So I was actually, the fact that we are going to implement universal pharmacare is a huge part of why I was drawn to the NDP and our commitments. And I'm very proud of our commitment to making sure that everybody in Canada has access to the medications they need when they need it. And our universal pharmacare program will also include dental care and vision care, because we recognize that those are also important parts of overall health. And as the question mentioned, will ultimately lower our healthcare costs. So we are committed to working with the provinces and implementing universal pharmacare by the end of 2020, and we will be working with the provinces to make sure that it's maintained across the board. We'll make sure that the federal government is upholding the Canada Healthcare Act like it's supposed to do, but has not been doing for a very long time, as it should be doing. So we'll be making sure that's happening and implementing universal pharmacare by the end of 2020.
Mr. Spina.
Thank you very much. And this is an incredibly important question. And there's a number of reasons why this is so incredibly important. And one of them is the fact that this has been an election promise of the Liberal Party since 1997. That's 22 years. 22 years ago, this was an election promise. So I cannot stand up here and promise to do something for you during an election that something has been promised for that many years and not been done. That would be irresponsible of me. Now, the Conservative Party of Canada knows that access to healthcare and access to medications is important for everyone, including seniors. We also recognize that life has become more difficult, especially for seniors who are on a fixed income. We know that anything like a universal pharmacare program will drastically increase taxes for every Canadian, including seniors. We are committed to working with every province across this great nation to ensure that every senior has the health care and the services they deserve and the health care that they need. That's why we are committed to also increasing funding to health care to every single province so that they can rely on predictable, sustainable funding for the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Am I good to go? Great. So to echo what Sarah said, I'm 24 years old. In a few months, I'm going to be 25, and the funding that covers me for my medications is going to run out. So I'm concerned about this issue as well. And the Green Party plans to similarly implement universal pharmacare for everyone by 2020. Part of that program is to buy medications in bulk, which will drive down costs and allow for more niche drugs to be funded more effectively. Part of that as well is reducing the, patent protection period for new drugs so that we can get more general drugs into and reduced prices on those. I disagree, frankly, with Mr. Spina about taxation. Our plan for taxation is to tax excessively rich corporations and excessively rich Canadians who aren't contributing to the economy effectively. So by taxing them, we will be able to afford all of our programs. Thank you.
Mr. Sheehan.
One of the things that define us as Canadians is our universal Medicare. It's publicly funded health care. That's what makes us proud to be Canadians. And that's why I'm proud as a Liberal candidate, is that we are committed to implementing a universal pharmacare program. We had an expert panel advise us on the proper way forward, and through our announcement, through our platform, we are going to implement it in a responsible way to make sure that people don't have to choose between the food they eat and the medications they need. It is absolutely critical. How can we have universal health care without pharmacare? That's the question I ask. The Conservatives, it's not part of their platform. They are not committed to it. I just want to make that clear. The NDP plan isn't responsible. Ours is. We're going to implement it, and we're going to make sure that Canadians have the medications that they need that are affordable. And we've already laid the groundwork for that by introducing legislation in this past 4 years, which is starting to see the effect and making us have the ability to implement it, including dealing with the patents and issues of that. So it's going to save billions of dollars. And you are correct with your questions. Billions and billions and billions. How can we afford not to? It's one of our commitments, and we are committed fully. Thank you.
Ms. Cano.
Thank you for that question. So the People's Party of Canada, we have a healthcare policy. We're going to take the GST portion. What happens is the federal and the provincial governments don't agree sometimes, and the federal government will give the provinces money for healthcare, but the provinces and territories gets piled into a large budget pile of money, and they spend on other things other than healthcare. So the People's Party of Canada wants to mandate to the provinces and territories what they can spend on the healthcare. There's $40 billion a year that gets collected in GST payments, and those payments will be given back to the provinces as long as that money is spent directly on healthcare services, like their pharmacare, the drug plans, things for addictions, mental health, doctors, nurses, expanding hospitals. That's $40 billion across the board that will not cost the Canadian citizen any more money in tax. It's taxes we're already paying. And this puts the onus on the provinces and territories to spend that money directly on healthcare services. And there was something else I was going to say, but I forgot. But it's the best thing we have to make the provinces and territories have control where it sets targets and goals for this money, instead of it just going into their big pot. Thank you.
So for the second question, we will start with Mr. Spina.
The next question deals with making retirement income more secure. Canadians deserve a secure and dignified retirement with a guaranteed and sufficient source of income. According to Statistics Canada, approximately 60,000 Canadian seniors live in poverty, while recent increases to the Canadian Pension Plan, CPP, Old Age Security Program, OAS, and Guaranteed Income Supplement, GIS, are a step in the right direction. More needs to be done to ensure that the older Canadians can enjoy a healthy, active, and dignified retirement with a guaranteed and sufficient source of income. So the question is, What is your party's retirement income security plan for seniors now and for future generations?
Thank you very much. And this is, again, another very important question. Seniors have contributed more to our society than anyone else that we're living with today. You've contributed year after year, and right now we have a government that has made it harder and harder for each of us, including seniors especially, to make ends meet and to get by increasing taxes and increasing the cost of living on everything from gas to groceries and home heating. The Conservative Party of Canada recognizes these difficulties, and we recognize that it's getting harder, especially for seniors, to make ends meet or simply have a trip to go visit your grandkids. When you have to choose whether or not you can put gas in your car to visit your grandkids, that's a very difficult choice, and we don't want you to have to make it. So how are we going to make life more affordable for seniors? Well, first, our universal tax cut is going to put an average of $850 back in the pockets of every Canadian. Also, we're going to increase the age benefit by $1,000 for old age security. For a senior couple, that's $300 back in your pockets. We're going to remove the carbon tax from everything. And we're also going to remove the GST from your home heating, saving you another $107 a year. Our goal is to put more money back in your pockets so that you can not only just get by, but you can start getting ahead. We recognize that you have each lived within your means for every year of your life, and you deserve a government that will do the same so we can put more money in your pockets.
One of the main platforms of the Green Party is poverty reduction. We recognize that reducing poverty not only allows for people to participate more fully in society, but also allows for better access to health and healthcare, and better access to education, and better access to even recreation. So one of the fundamental platform pieces of the Green Party is a guaranteed livable income. This will work with municipalities, provinces, and Indigenous people to streamline income supports for people with disabilities, for veterans, for seniors who are living below the poverty line. We have so many people living below the poverty line, and it needs to be addressed. And that's part of the UN development goals, is to eliminate poverty. So with a guaranteed livable income, no one would live with poverty. In addition, we want to strengthen pensions by increasing the payback from 25% to 50%, and protect private pensions by giving them preeminence in insolvency and bankruptcy proceedings. So by strengthening pensions and ensuring that no one lives in poverty, regardless of where they live in Canada, we can solve this issue. Thank you.
Mr. Sheehan.
Thank you very much for that question. And what we have introduced has been identified in this particular question. We have made improvements to OAS, GIS, and the CPP. We rolled back retirement age from 67 to 65. That's what Harper and Scheer did without consultation. They just did that. Also, what we have done with the GIS, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, is increasing it by a tune of almost $947 on average. That's helping 900,000 senior citizens. We're also committed to boosting the supplement again in the OAS when someone turns 75 by 10%. That's going to put additional money in people's pockets. And of the tens of thousands of people that are living in poverty, that will also reduce that amount significantly. We've made enhancements to the CPP, including the survivor's benefit as well, when a partner passes away, so that is also increased. The changes that we have made, I'm proud of. They're significant, and what we're introduced in our platform is going to see more improvements. And I haven't had an opportunity to talk to all of you shaking hands, but I know for a fact that it's hard being a senior citizen, so we are trying to make it easier for you by making those increases. Thank you.
Ms. Zaccato.
Maybe not. Okay. So right now we are using borrowed money for all of our social programs in Canada. This increases our taxes, and this makes life harder in living. The People's Party of Canada wants to immediately reduce the carbon tax. The Conservative Party wants to do it in 2022. The carbon tax has increased our cost of living significantly, from heating our homes to running our vehicles. This isn't exactly an environmental strategy or a way to clean up the environment. It's just a tax on top of a tax. The People's Party of Canada believes in lowering your taxes instead of taking the money from you and giving it back to you in little credits across the board, or if you fit this criteria, you get a credit back. We just believe in not taking it from you in the first place. On average, the average household will save $2,000 a year if you have double income in your household. This, you can spend that money on food or your child's physical activities or whichever you see fit. That's your money that you get to just keep in your pocket. The other thing the People's Party of Canada is going to do is to abolish the capital gains tax. So the capital gains tax, for getting ahead, you get penalized for, so we don't believe in that.
So the third question, sorry, we still have one more down at the end. I'm sorry.
It's okay. So I honestly cannot tell you how many times I've had this conversation over the course of this campaign. So many people have asked me, what are you going to do about the CPP? It is not enough. I'm scraping by. I was speaking to one gentleman a few days ago who said that he doesn't even have enough to buy a new pair of socks by the time he pays his bills. So he's got 2 pairs of socks that he's been darning for the last couple of years. And that's not okay. So we're committed to opening up a review of all of the income security programs, including CPP, OAS, GIS, and making sure that they're livable rates. Because it's true that, seniors have been paying into this their whole lives. You deserve to retire with dignity. You shouldn't be having to scrimp and save. And we're also going to make sure that any private pensions as well, so if you have a pension from work, we're going to make sure that those are protected as well. We'll introduce legislation that makes sure that pensioners are at the front of the line if a business goes into bankruptcy, because right now we know they're often kind of lost at the back of the line, and debtors get the money first. We want to make sure that pensioners get that money first so that they're protected, because you've planned for your retirement expecting that money, and we want to make sure that you get that money.
Thank you. Now we can start with question number 3, and the first to respond will be Mr. McLean. I have the question.
Yes, the next 2 questions will deal with implementing a national senior strategy. Canada needs a national senior strategy that optimizes health, financial security, and social inclusion so all Canadians can age with dignity. There are gaps in health care and social policies that hinder older Canadians from aging with dignity and continuing to participate in their communities. Independently addressing these issues has not worked. An integrated approach is necessary to meet the changing needs of seniors. We need a coordinated national senior strategy with dedicated funding and accountable goals. How will your party implement a national senior strategy that addresses health care infrastructure, caregiver support, home care, long-term care, and age-friendly communities?
Thank you for that question. We do have a national senior care strategy as well as a national dementia care strategy, and it includes all the things that you mentioned. Enshrining the right to safe and affordable housing. That's a larger issue, but it affects seniors disproportionately. As I mentioned with poverty, reducing poverty, but also allowing for cooperative housing for seniors, and I guess this gets into the next question a bit more, but clarifying and streamlining professional qualifications from people trying to move into Canada. We have a shortage of nurses and doctors who are specialized in gerontology, and we need to allow them to come into the country a lot easier. Part of that is working on medical assistance in dying legislation, and allowing for advanced directives and living wills for people wishing to end their lives with dignity. So we do have a whole strategy, and there is a lot to it. I don't have enough time with 1.5 minutes, though. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the question. And some of you were here last year. I had the honor and privilege of seconding a private member's bill from a member from Sudbury, and it was just that, a national strategy for seniors. And we had a full room like this, and we had lots of great input. And we're starting to implement a lot of that grassroots stuff. We have put in place a minister for seniors whose responsibility is to implement many of these. We have put in $50 million into a national Alzheimer's dementia strategy, which is absolutely critical. We also have implemented and announced our health care platform, which guarantees that people across Canada are going to have access to a doctor or to a primary health care team. 5 billion people across this country do not have doctors, and that's a shame. And we're going to do that. We've put money forward, and we're going to do it by negotiating with provinces and territories. So I ask you this question: who do you think should be negotiating with Doug Ford? Do we think Scheer? Because they're cut from the same cloth. I don't think we need a dance partner there. We need somebody that's going to negotiate these in a very meaningful way to make sure that they're implemented. But our platform is about a national senior strategy. Thank you.
Ms. Zaccato.
Thanks. So that's the problem between the federal and the provincial government. The federal government has to ask please to the provinces and territories when it comes to health care because it falls under provincial jurisdiction. Under the People's Party of Canada platform, it mandates to the provinces and territories that they have to spend that money on health care. We have an aging population. This is the backbone of our Canadians right now. They need to be taken care of. We can't allow a government on a provincial level to state that they're going to keep cutting health care costs, cut the budget. We can't cut it anymore. We have to increase it. We're at a critical point in Canada right now. It's affected from coast to coast. It's not just one area, it's across the board. With $40 billion, that would go a long way. So we're done trying to negotiate with the provinces, and we're just going to tell them, if you want your GST money back, this is where it has to go. It's going to go into healthcare. It's going to go into home care. It's going to go into seniors complex. It's going to go into a pharmacare program. This is how it's going to work, and this is the only method that will work, is to make them, give them goals, set targets, put strategies in place that they have to follow. Otherwise, they don't get the money. And I bet you they're going to want their $40 billion. So that is going to excessively increase our healthcare services in Canada.
Ms. McCleary.
One of our commitments to Canadians is to implement a national healthcare strategy. It's to have a focus on 3 particular areas, so healthcare, seniors isolation, and poverty. So I already talked a little bit about the poverty side of things, although there is more to it. But in terms of healthcare, we want to make sure that the federal government is making healthcare a priority again. And to address the question of home care and long-term care, we want to make sure that a national standard is implemented for minimum standards of care and make sure that that's across the board Canada-wide. And then in terms of isolation, we want to make sure that seniors have access to, community centers and transit. And then we also want to, explore the possibility of intergenerational housing, because we've seen success with that in other countries, and it's a good model to use here in Canada to address seniors isolation. So there are a lot of pieces to our national senior strategy. We also want to make sure we're addressing dementia and creating a dementia strategy as well. And we also want to make sure that caregivers are taken care of as well, because we know that some people even have to do. So we want to make the caregiver tax credit refundable rather than just a credit. So we are looking to make sure that we're taking care of seniors across Canada.
Mr. Spina, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, this is another very important question. When we're talking about healthcare and the healthcare of our seniors, I don't think there's anybody here who doesn't think that's one of the top priorities for anybody. What we recognize is that this is, in fact, a provincial issue. We need a government at the federal level that can work with every province to ensure that everyone has their needs met. The Conservative Party of Canada has actually written a letter guaranteeing every single province that not only will our government not reduce funding to healthcare and social services across this country, we will increase it by a minimum of 3% every single year. The reason we're going to do that is so provinces can count on predictable, sustainable funding so that they can put these programs in place long term. We're also investing $1.5 billion into equipment that we can send to healthcare providers across this country to reduce wait times for individuals who are seeking assessments. Those are very important investments. Now, we also know that the federal government has to get along with the provinces in order to get this done. My friend and colleague from the Liberal Party to my left has spent the last 2 months antagonizing and demeaning Doug Ford and the provincial government in an attempt to confuse voters about who this election is really about. This election is a federal election about the Federal Conservative Party of Canada. And we have a track record of working with all levels of government, and I personally have a track record of working with every level of government in order to get things done for the city, and I will continue to fight for every person in this city if I'm elected as your MP.
So now we come to question 4. We will start with Mr. Sheehan this time. We'll hear the question first, though, please, before the answer.
Thank you.
This is effectively a part 2 of the question we've been addressing for the last few minutes.
Could you move your microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. Sorry. This is effectively part 2 of the question we've just been talking about for the last couple of minutes. Many Canadians do not have access to a primary caregiver, and with 1 geriatrician per 15,000 adults, Canada is unprepared to meet the current and growing demand for geriatric expertise. We need consistent national healthcare standards and adequate healthcare staffing, including more geriatric services and personal support workers. The question is, how will your party support healthcare and personal support professionals to meet the growing need for geriatric expertise in Canada?
Well, thank you very much. It allows me to expand on this really, really important topic. I've been knocking on doors for a few months now, and that is something that I constantly discovering at the door, is that there are many people here in Sault Ste. Marie and the riding that do not have access to a doctor or a healthcare professional. So I was very pleased to see that we did announce that we are committed to making sure that every Canadian will have access to a doctor or a primary health care team. It's absolutely critical to have that, and we will do it by investing, not cutting services, not cutting services like the Conservatives like to do. We're investing $6 billion over the next few years on that, but also on mental health, which is absolutely critical as well. We've already been investing as well in home care. Home care is absolutely critical. We've invested money in that over the last number of years, and we're going to continue to invest in healthcare because it is important to us as Canadians. We have been involved all our life in this great country, and you know what? When you get older, you expect the same care. You expect the same care no matter where you live, whether it's in Sault Ste. Marie or Toronto or Vancouver. You expect those same services, and we're committed to that, and it's definitely a crown jewel in our platform. Thank you.
Ms. Accato.
So the Liberals want to invest from borrowed money, which all that creates is more taxes on our shoulders after. That's great that they want to invest in that, but when we take money that we're already spending in our GST and give it back to the province under the mandating, that would work too. The People's Party of Canada also wants to increase our economic immigrants. Right now we're governed under the UN because the Liberal government signed on to the UN treaty. And UN tells us which immigrants we can bring into Canada. They dictate it to us. So the People's Party of Canada wants to say that we have a hole in our doctor system. We don't have enough. There's a big gap there. We need more. So we're going to increase our economic immigrants, which is bringing in the doctors that we need into Canada. So that'll increase our doctors. I was on a waiting list for 5 years to get a doctor in Sault Ste. Marie. These are things that are undescribable, and For Canada being strong and free, sometimes when we live paycheck to paycheck and don't have healthcare services, it almost feels like a third world country. The People's Party of Canada wants to build it back up and make it strong. And in doing that, we're going to find the people that we need to fill the gaps in our economy and bring them here to service us and help Canada be strong.
Ms. McCleary.
So there are a couple different parts to this. First, in terms of primary caregivers, we want to make sure that the federal government is making healthcare a priority. We want to recommit the federal government to making healthcare a priority so that we can make sure that the funding is there and that we're able to attract those doctors that we need. And also we want to make sure that credential recognition process is a lot quicker, because I know, I was at the Walk-In in the Station Walls a couple years ago, and there's a man there he's a doctor from a different country, but he's been here for 6 years waiting for his credentials to be recognized. And so that's somebody right there, ready and willing to be a doctor here in the Soo, and it's taking him 6 years. So we want to make that process quicker. But then on the other side of things, when we're talking about personal support workers and long-term care, we want, as I said, we want to legislate a minimum standard of care so that will help both patients, because they're receiving the care. We'll make sure that they get more than, I think it's 8 minutes right now of care per day. And then it will also help the workers. Their jobs will be less stressful. They won't be facing violence in the workplace as much as they do right now. And that will in turn keep people in that field, and they will attract more people to that field, because I know right now my mother-in-law is a PSW and she's constantly getting called for extra shifts because they just don't have the people. So by doing that, it will help both patients and the caregivers.
Thank you, Mr. Spina.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your patience. Thank you for this question. It allows a great time to follow up and build on what we were saying earlier. This is something that's incredibly important, and we firmly believe that we can attract the best and brightest from around the world to come to Canada, and we can speed up that recognition process for credentials for people not only coming to Canada new, but people traveling across Canada. There's no reason that we should have interprovincial restrictions that would stop someone from being recognized in another province here in Canada. We want to speed that up and build on that so people can get the health care they need. Now, I know that my friend often likes to say that Conservatives are going to cut in order to do these things, and it's something that's a buzzword that they like to say, but I'm here to tell you that we can do these things without drastic cuts. We can do these things very simply by living within our means and spending responsibly. We proposed absolutely no cuts to seniors funding and to child benefits. So seniors benefits and children's benefits will remain exactly the same. What we will continue to invest in is healthcare across this country. We will make sure that they have predictable, sustainable funding, and that we bring the best and brightest from around the world, and we recognize them here in Canada so they can actually service our population, and they can travel province to province to do that. And we want to make that faster and easier to give you not only the healthcare you need, but the healthcare you deserve.
I'd first like to bring attention to the fact that Sunny mentioned two things and listed only two things that were not going to get cut. But I digress. And I was looking to be a doctor at one point. After my degree, I was like, oh, maybe I should be a doctor. And I was already tens of thousands of dollars in debt to get the bachelor's degree. So spending tens and tens of thousands of dollars more to become a doctor and 12 years to specialize. On top of that, huge expense, huge investment that as middle class, low class people cannot afford. So the Green Party wants to eliminate tuition and eliminate student debt so that we can train people to be doctors, to be nurses, to be personal support workers, and invest in the people instead of giving tax loopholes to corporations and 50% tax returns on meals and entertainment. There's lots of ways that we can afford all of these programs, and it's about going for the top. In addition, my sister's a nurse. We have lots of nurses back there. We have to protect unions and their right to that sort of thing, and as Sarah mentioned, clarify and streamline credential recognition for people coming into Canada. Thank you.
Well, we seem to be at question 5 already.
That's right.
Or am I not counting?
I believe I have the last question.
Oh, okay, well, we'll start with Ms. Zaccato.
The last question deals with climate change, an issue of great importance to Canadians of all ages. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, is an intergovernmental body of the United Nations. It is dedicated to providing the world with an objective scientific view of climate change, its natural, political, and economic impacts and risks, and the possible response options. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says that we have 12 years to significantly cut carbon output. The question is, what policies will your government enact immediately upon election and throughout the rest of its mandate to address the climate crisis?
Thank you for that question. It's such a hot topic across the board in Canada, climate change. So the People's Party of Canada, we do have a global warming and environmental platform policy. In that it states that we will immediately be putting into place so that all communities have clean drinking water and clean swimming areas, so to clean up the lakes and rivers if need be. There's a lot of smaller communities that have boiling advisories right now, and to live in Canada and have boiling advisories is kind of a bizarre thing in a world like today, when we can just go there as the responsible federal government and help them assist in what it takes to get them immediately safe drinking water. We also are going to ensure that current legislation is enforced for all, so that we have all clean air to keep Canada clean and safe for all of us and for our future generations. One of the things that we're not going to do is give $40 billion contracts to China to manufacture steel. We can't control how China regulates their environmental policies, but in Canada we can control. We have one of the strongest, cleanest manufacturing legislations for climate control and clean air, and we should be doing those kinds of things here at home.
So I definitely, climate change is a huge priority for me. I've got 2 young children right now, and quite frankly, I'm terrified for their future if we don't act quickly. So I am very happy to stand behind the NDP's commitments to Canadians on climate change. There is a lot to it, so I won't be able to get into all of our plans moving forward, but we will be setting targets that are based on scientific evidence to make sure that the global temperature increase is set at 1.5 degrees or lower. And we'll be doing that by investing in new green technologies, whether it's the research and development or the manufacture of those new green technologies. And also we'll be implementing a program of retrofitting all buildings, so making sure all government buildings are retrofitted. But we also want to retrofit all current housing stock by 2050, and we'll be doing that by providing no-interest loans to individuals who want to retrofit their homes, and then those will be repayable by the energy savings that the families will see. We also will establish a climate auditor position. So we'll have an independent auditor who is tracking our progress towards our targets, because right now we are nowhere on track to meeting our Paris commitments, and we want to make sure that we are. So we'll implement that independent auditor to make sure that we're on track.
Thank you. So this is an incredibly important issue for me personally. For those of you that I know in this room, you know that I live most of my life outside. And I've grown up in Sault Ste. Marie my entire life, so I can tell you that the environment is something that is incredibly important to me and has been my entire life. That's why I won't support anything that is shy of a real plan that will protect our environment moving forward. Canada's Conservatives have a real plan. We recognize that a carbon tax is nothing more than a tax, plain and simple. That's all it is, and does nothing to protect our environment. And in fact, it exempts the largest emitters and leaves 92% of the carbon tax to be paid by you and I. Our plan invests in three things. Technologies, not taxes. We will force the largest emitters to invest their own dollars to become greener, more energy efficient, and reduce their greenhouse gases. The next thing it focuses on is a cleaner, greener natural environment. We want to restore funding that the current government has cut for wetlands and conservation areas and bring those entities back. We want to increase our ability to recycle plastics and get those moving along faster. And the next thing that we recognize is that we must take the climate change fight global to have a real impact. I always tell people that we recognize that emissions, unlike people, do not require a passport to cross borders. We need to work with our partners around the world, because if we cannot lead them and we cannot have them reducing their emissions, we cannot have a meaningful impact on reducing global emissions. We recognize we can be leaders in Canada, and that's why we want to export our technology to them.
Firstly, industrial carbon capture technology doesn't exist yet. So for us to reach our goals, we have to invest in technology that already exists, solar, renewable energies, and we need to do that 10 years ago. And we need to divest from fossil fuels. People have been saying that for decades. And if you want a real plan, yes, carbon tax is part of that. And that puts money back into people's pockets. But we also need to put a moratorium on fossil fuel development, modernize agriculture practices to fix carbon, modernize passenger rail so that people can travel without huge carbon emissions, invest in prevention of erosion, fire, flood, and drought, because that is going to be a larger issue in the future. It includes retrofitting homes and building homes that are energy neutral. And it's about creating a national electrical grid so that we can share electricity across the country. It's about putting moratorium on internal combustion engines and giving rebates for electrical vehicles. So if you want a real plan, it needs to be all of these things, and it needs to be now. And the Green Party is the party that has the fully integrated plan on this. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and first of all, thank you very much for that very important question. Being here at the Senior Center reminds me that one of the biggest climate action advocates is my grandmother, who's turning 104 in December. And she was doing this a long time ago, and I applaud your efforts for that. We believe that climate change is real. The Conservatives, they have a fake plan. It's not real. Ours is real. We believe that the economy and the environment can go hand in hand, and we're demonstrating that here in Sault Ste. Marie. We have solar panel manufacturing here that's creating jobs, but is also working towards our goal of net zero by 2050. We've implemented many changes in the past, but we're committed to further implementation. I was speaking with a lady today about the rain and how the flooding that we had 2 weeks ago. In our platform, we're committed to a national insurance program for flooding to make it affordable, because there's so many people in Sault Ste. Marie that do not have flooding insurance because they've been hit for the last few years. And I'm talking in the area too as well. That's just one example. We're also committed to planting 2 billion trees to make the air cleaner, the old-fashioned way of fighting climate change. But our plan is real, and it's robust, and we're going to put a price on pollution to change things for the future. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. We have gone through the questions very quickly. I thank the candidates for their preparedness, and you have been succinct and done your homework. We're fortunate. So now we're going to invite questions from the audience. We have until about 3:20 to have your questions. If you have a question, you come forward to the microphone that's in the middle aisle here. The candidates will have 40 seconds to answer the question. And I think maybe we will just start with Ms. McCleary and go up and down the line, just in that order, if that's, is that?
I'm just thinking about a combination here. I could take the microphone.
Sure. Okay. Good idea. The candidates will have 40 seconds each to answer. So let me remind you, you're asking a question, not making a speech. An introductory observation or something is fine, but let's not have the questions longer than the answers if you can help it.
Well, my first comment.
Yeah, it was.
Hello? Okay. My first comment.
I guess it doesn't want me to talk. You're all very smooth talkers, okay? I have two of the topics that are very dear to my heart. One is healthcare, one is recycling. I am a very good candidate for healthcare. I've had many issues in healthcare in the last year or so. My concern is having to travel out of town for surgery. Now, my surgeon that I am seeing is quite capable of doing the surgery I need, but our hospital is not set up for it. So I have to go to Toronto. I have to fly to Toronto, I have to stay in Toronto. Money costs, hotel bills, food, whatever, when my doctor is quite capable of doing it here, but she can't because we're not set up for it. Now my question would be, I would like to know which party is going to be strong enough to stand up and fight for the health care that we really need. Now recycling is another thing. We do recycle in our building and our recycling bins are full every week that they are emptied, but our plastic recycling is very limited. The only thing they take are things that are marked 1 and 2, which excludes yogurt containers, margarine containers, kitty litter containers. Anything that's a heavy plastic ends up in the landfill because we cannot recycle it. They won't take it. Now, my question for that is, how can these plants and how can our government set up, either get the people who are making these plastics to redo them and make them recyclable, or to get our plants so that they are accepting these things so they don't end up in our landfill.
Two questions. Yeah, I was just going to comment on that. You snuck 2 questions in. I think you're the only one that's going to get away with that. I think it only fair to let the candidates answer both questions. And maybe we'll take the first question and go down the line, and then the second question and go down the line. So the first question dealt with healthcare and having to go out of town for surgery. Ms. McCleary.
Good to go. So as far as traveling for medical care, that's absolutely a major issue here in the Soo. My dad right now is waiting for a surgery as well that he, it's looking like he can't get it done here either, and he's going to have to go to Toronto. So it's absolutely something that it's largely a provincial priority or a provincial matter, but the federal government is responsible for upholding the Health Care Act. And so that's something we're committed to doing, is making sure that the provinces are meeting their responsibilities under the Health Care Act and using the funds that they receive from the federal government as they're supposed to be using them. And it's been too long now that the federal government hasn't been doing that, and we're going to make sure that we are.
going to have to get a timer for the timer.
That's okay.
Oh, I'm teasing, you know. I think we've gotten this far.
Wonderful. Well, ma'am, thank you for that question. And I share your experience. You know, it was about 7 years ago. My mother passed away, unfortunately, and she had to go out of town for treatment as well. And it was quite difficult for my father and my family for that. So I completely understand where you're coming from, and thank you for sharing your experience. We do recognize this is a provincial issue. Healthcare is a provincial matter, and I've let you know that we are committed to funding that provincially, but we're committed to something more. We're committed to having meaningful conversations with the provincial government. We know that after the past several months of the current Liberal Party attacking the provincial government, it'll be difficult, if not impossible, for them to have those conversations and partner with them moving forward. I have a proven record of working with everyone at every level of government, and as your MP, I will fight every single day to make sure you get what you need.
So in terms of transportation, the Green Party has a national passenger rail program that we hope to implement, but in the short term, a different program is to increase health funding transfers to provinces based on need and based on demographics instead of based off of GDP as it is now. So that would allow for more funding for specific needs within communities and create more funding for seniors specifically as the population starts to age. Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for the question. So the first part about the healthcare, and my government recognizes that the federal government needs to play more of a role because they're seeing what's happening in Ontario, and that's why we have announced $6 billion in addition to the $11 billion that we had announced prior for home care and for mental health care. And that's about a number of things, including doctor and healthcare recruitment. On your specific ask about the equipment that is needed, I think that that is something that we as a community need to look at. The federal government, I'm pleased to have brought in $250 million to this community for a variety of infrastructure needs, a variety of them. And if there's something and a way that we can play a role in that, we will. We will not abdicate our role on that either. But we certainly do need to address healthcare here in Sault Ste. Marie.
We're fortunate in Sault Ste. Marie, if I get the gist of your question, it's very irritating to have to go to town to have any kind of work done. And we have, fortunate in Sault Ste. Marie, because we have that nice, new, beautiful, large hospital. If you have to go to Tim Hortons while you're in there, it takes you about 20 minutes to walk from one side of it to the end. It's so big. So what we want to do with People's Party of Canada is mandate to the province, here is $40 billion. It has to be spent on healthcare. The Sault Ste. Marie Hospital has the third floor that needs to be open so we can have the equipment put in place. Yes, this takes millions and millions of dollars, but that's just a portion of the $40 billion. So the money will be there to reinstate and to employ and bring in more doctors and nurses to staff the whole third floor and bring in the equipment that we need.
Thank you. The second question then dealt with the limited limitations on the kinds of plastics that can be recycled, the heavier ones not being eligible. Okay, we'll start. Sure. Mr. Spina.
Sure. And thank you again for your second question. So we talked about this a bit earlier when I was talking to you about the Conservatives' plan for the environment. We have the most robust environmental plan that has ever been put forward by an opposition party in the history of our country. That plan includes increasing our ability to recycle plastics. That is part of our plan. We've written that in there. It's a document that anyone can read. It is a real plan that will have a massive effect on climate change and will have a massive effect on keeping our environment clean and green for future generations, because I know every person in this room wants to leave a great environment for your grandkids, and I want that too.
So, a large part of this issue is that all the technology exists for processing this plastic. All the technology exists for repurposing it and turning it into other things. And the products exist to get us off of plastic to begin with. So the Green Party has plans for both investing in technology that already exists and implementing it in municipalities, as well as bringing out the products that can displace plastics. In addition, we're hoping to... That was for you? Okay.
Time flies.
That was punny. Well, thank you very much for that question and observation. And my government and our platform is doing just what you've asked. We will be banning single-use plastics over the next couple of years, because that way it will have companies make the changes that are necessary to allow you to recycle and to reuse. So again, thank you very much. That is a big part of our platform. Thank you.
So recycling is very important for the environment. We need to reuse the items that we're using. Every year we have billions of tons of waste that go into the landfills. So under the People's Party of Canada, we believe in keeping Canada free and clean of this. And if it takes throwing in and implementing a program where we increase the things that we can recycle, the problem that we have is getting everybody on board to get rid of the #1 plastics. It's hard to do. And personal responsibility is important. When you're at the grocery store, if you bring your own bags, that's great. You'll notice there's a lot of political signs everywhere in Sault Ste. Marie. You'll see PPC has very few, that's me. Those all just end up in the landfill. So everybody can do their part.
Ms. McCleary?
So this is absolutely a frustration for me as well. I've actually spoken with the municipality here a couple of times about this, because there's no reason that we shouldn't be able to expand our recycling here in town. And actually I got an idea from a friend to bring some stuff with me to Toronto, where the recycling is a bit better, so when I go visit my sister, I bring some with me to recycle there. But absolutely, we need to move away from, I think what it comes down to is we need to move away from the use of plastics. And that's something that we're committed to supporting and working on. As I mentioned, part of our green plan is to invest in new technologies and in the manufacture of those, and making sure that companies are not using those single-use plastics.
Thank you. So who has the next question?
My question has to do with the crime in the city. In Sault Ste. Marie, the theft due to the drug use is off the charts. And also, we watch the Toronto news all the time, and the murders that are happening in Toronto is incredible these days. Now, I see in Sault Ste. Marie, the police are doing a great job. They seem to arresting the people, but the courts are just letting them back out on the streets. So we have this catch and release in the city, and I know the mayor in Toronto has said the same thing, that they are re-arresting people that have murdered people and are out on bail. So I want to know what your government is going to do about the crime in this country.
We'll start with Mr. McLean. Thank you.
So I'm a mental health worker. I'm with Canadian Mental Health Association, and in that role, I see that a lot of the crime that exists is either due to poverty or mental illness. And if we don't address those two key things, then we're not addressing the core issue of crime. So a mental health strategy is something that we hope to implement, as well as an opioid and drug strategy. And as I mentioned before, poverty, reducing poverty and making safe and affordable housing a key issue.
Thank you, Mr. Sheehan.
Thank you very much for that very, very important question, and we'll talk a little more after because 40 seconds won't do this answer justice. We put $51 million signed in January with our health minister that was here in town with the provincial health minister. They had to match that with 51, so that's $102 million in emergency funding to address the opioid crisis, and it is rampant here in Sault Ste. Marie. We are committed to continue to work with the local drug task force. The health minister and I were here meeting with them, and there was law enforcement at the table, healthcare professionals, and a slew of people. And we know there's a lot of ideas. We've resourced them, so we're going to continue to work forward on those solutions. Thank you.
Yes, this is definitely a matter that's getting worse in Sault Ste. Marie and across the board in Canada. The opioid issue has now become a crisis. People are dying daily from this. And this definitely falls in within the healthcare. I understand your question was about crime and catch and release. It does stem with drug use that you did mention and our healthcare system. It needs to be increased funding for these items so that people get the help that they need. Right now there is no help. It's all voluntary. When we had the Riverview Hospital here, that was the best thing Sault Ste. Marie could have had because at least people had somewhere to go. They could go for help. Now trying to get help in our system is lacking.
So like Gio said, crime ultimately comes down to the social issues behind it that lead to the criminal behavior. So that's really the focus of what we want to address. We want to declare a national emergency for the opioid crisis. We want to make sure that that's being addressed with some urgency, because we know that is leading to crime, particularly here in the Soo. We know our rates here in the Soo per capita are some of the highest in at least Ontario and I think in Canada. So we want to address that, and we want to address the issues of poverty, like Gio mentioned again, making life more affordable for Canadians and raising them out of poverty. And in that, by doing that, it will prevent some of the crime and opioid use. Sorry.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've been dealing with this for 17 years. I've seen this in our community, and 2.5 years ago I brought this to the attention of everyone and hosted the very first ever town hall on opioid issues in Sault Ste. Marie. Now, unfortunately, our government was slow to react to that. So Sault Ste. Marie has seen, you're correct, has seen a lot of crime. Now, our party is committed. We know that there are strategies in place to address the root causes of crime, to address addictions, and to address mental health issues. Those strategies are in place. What we need is a government that imposes restrictions on criminals, that we create laws that are directed to criminals, and that we hold them accountable for the behavior with things like mandatory minimum sentencing for violent offenders. And that's what I support.
Hello. This is specifically for Sault Ste. Marie and I suppose Northern Ontario. I would like to have a passenger rail service in this community. We need it here. We deserve it here. We want to be connected to the rest of Ontario and beyond. I'd like to be connected to other northern cities by rail. When our highways close in the winter, and they do every year, people can't travel. We would draw a lot more tourists in this community if we had passenger rail service. It could be a really wonderful experience. There would be all kinds of economic benefits to us having rail service. I'd like to know from each one of you what your party is prepared to do for that.
I think this time we start with Mr. Sheehan. No time to think.
Thank you very much for the question, Don. This morning, some of us had met with Chief Goche and the Coalition for Passenger Trains, and I was pleased to see that they had completed their business plan, and we have just received that recently, and I'm proud that our government had funded that to almost $200,000, and there are a lot of opportunities and strengths in there that I think that we could work towards to deliver passenger rail service. We know that the passenger rail, the rail itself is owned by private companies, but we have plans in place to first of all, create the infrastructure that we need so that will allow passenger rail, not just north-south, but what about to Sudbury? And if you take a look at my letter in the back, I have a commitment to rail in there too as well. Thank you.
All the way around.
The problem is that the candidate only has 40 seconds and he's used it. So your question...
Okay, it's over.
It's over. It's over for Mr. Sheehan. So there's no point asking it. Doesn't get better twice.
That's another hot topic we have is the rail system. So People's Party of Canada wants to unite Canadians and have a strong rail system. We're going to cut, right now, we spend almost $2 billion for infrastructure and roads in overseas. We want to take that money back and spend it in Canada to up our rail system. They need to be upgraded and fix our highways and our bridges that needs work on. These things are deteriorating, and the longer we let it go, the worse it is to try and fix it after and the more money it costs. So we need to stop some of our overseas spending and spend it right here in Canada.
So the NDP is fully committed to reestablishing passenger rail here in Northern Ontario, both at the provincial and the federal level. I know right next door, the NDP MPP, Mike Mantha, has been working on it, and then also Carol Hughes, the NDP MP for Algoma Manitoulin. They've been working on it for a long time, and I'm looking forward to working on it with them. And actually, our party is the only one to have created a Northern Ontario platform, and within that platform is a commitment to reestablishing rail here in Northern Ontario.
Thank you very much. Another very important question. Some of my fellow candidates and I were at a meeting this morning with several members of our community who are dedicated to this exact issue. And I can tell you that I was absolutely inspired by the group and their business plan and what they've been doing to move forward. Now, they have my personal commitment that I will do absolutely everything I can to continue moving forward with them to ensure that this project is addressed and that I can support it. Now, we recognize that it's been far too long that this issue has been going on in our community. It needs a resolution now, and we need to act very soon to move forward with this so that all of these businesses can reap the benefits of this and our community can as well.
So the Green Party has, as I mentioned, a national passenger rail strategy. And the reason that it's to connect communities and to connect Canada. And the reason that we want to do it is because it's a matter of climate, it's a matter of reconciliation, it's a matter of economics within small communities, it's a matter of tourism, and it's a matter of accessibility. So all of those parts are why we want to do it, and we already have money earmarked for that. Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question.
Save the best for last. Yeah, I think, is it working? Yeah. So my name's Alicia, and I'm here representing the Ontario Nurses Association.
I'm having difficulty hearing.
Closer? Second? Yes. Okay. So I am a nurse in the community, and I'm here with some other fabulous nurses, and we are at the forefront of healthcare. We see the promises said, and they go unanswered. So I brought some facts just for each of the candidate, and I want to ask them a question. So across Ontario, 34,000 seniors are waiting long-term care spaces across this province. It's said to go up to over 200,000 within the next 16 years across Canada. These patients are becoming more complex and requiring more assistance. We see this in our hospital, and it's crowding our hospital. We don't have the beds to care for these people, but they have nowhere else to go because we have no spaces for them. So what I want to know is, what will your party do to ensure that anyone who needs quality long-term care, how will they have access to it? Because we don't have enough spaces, specifically in Sault Ste. Marie, and we don't have enough beds in our hospital.
Me first. Thank you, Alicia. That is a very important question. So as the federal government and the PPC's party, we believe that making the province accountable for their actions instead of the health cuts, it needs to be increased. So that's why we are willing to allow them to keep their GST under very specific means where it's a pot of $40 billion annually, and healthcare and senior living and retirement homes are at the top of the list. They're getting less and less. The hospital beds, we see that when we go to the hospital, sometimes people have to wait in the hallways just to get into a bed because there's not enough rooms that are open because it's not staffed. These are all things that will be dealt with.
Thanks for coming. We spoke at the Strive debate about this. And like I said there, we are, and as I've said today, we're committed to making healthcare a priority for the federal government again, making sure that it's being funded as it needs to be from the federal government, but then also making sure that the provinces are using those funds as they're supposed to be doing. Right now, we're seeing here in Ontario, Doug Ford's making those cuts to healthcare and moving towards privatization, and we don't want that. We want to make sure that the federal government is upholding the Healthcare Act and holding the provinces responsible for providing the services that they're supposed to be providing and making sure that there are the beds available to those who need them.
Thank you so much for coming and thank you for your question. I can tell you I've seen this firsthand. I've spent a lot of time in the hospital with frontline workers, and they're second to none. They are running from the beginning of their shift to the end of their shift, and I often ask myself how they're doing it because they are working with little resources. My goal is to continue to work with every single province. And again, we want to make sure that there is predictable, sustainable funding. No cuts to healthcare funding across the country, increases of a minimum of 3% so that they can have that. And we want to continue those conversations with every province so we can find out how to do it better everywhere and so that we can increase the ability for our professionals to move province to province to help with those backlogs.
Hi, if I may speak to what I think you're hoping for, it's a preventative and proactive plan for an aging population. And the Green Party senior strategy and dementia strategy is exactly that. It's increasing long-term care beds. It's allowing for home share situations and to allow for people to stay in their homes as long as is reasonable. And it's about supporting workers and pensioners on a fundamental level. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that very, very important question. And as I mentioned earlier, we are making significant investments in healthcare nationally, and we're going to continue to do that to improve healthcare. Again, I pose the question, we see conservatives that promise a bunch during elections, but then once they get elected, they start cutting, and they cut in the wrong places, whether it's at our hospitals or to autism funding or to invest, and we will make sure that the money is sent in, $6 billion, and we will have a Prime Minister Trudeau negotiating instead of Andrew Scheer, because we don't need Scheer to have a dance partner with Doug Ford.
Thank you, candidates. You now have the opportunity to say what you want, not in response to a question, but to make some closing remarks. And you each have 2 minutes, and we'll start with Ms. McCleary and work down the line.
So, government is about making choices and showing your priorities through the choices that you make. And for a really long time now, we've had successive Liberal and Conservative governments that have chosen to funnel money up. We saw $12 million go to one of the most profitable companies in Canada to buy refrigerators. We have $3.3 billion a year going to the fossil fuel industry in subsidies. And I and the NDP choose to help the average person. Instead of funneling that money up, we want to make sure that everybody benefits from the programs and services provided by the government. I have been very open since the start of this campaign that my family and we struggle financially. I work 3 jobs. We live paycheck to paycheck. As I said, my husband went 3 months without one of his diabetes medications. And so that's why I was really drawn to our commitments. I think that they are really solid and will really help the average person in Sault Ste. Marie and everybody. Everybody benefits from universal pharmacare, from more affordable housing, from cell phone and internet caps, and from more daycare spaces. Everybody benefits from that one way or another, whether directly or indirectly. And it's important to me that everybody here also make a choice. You make an informed choice, and that you choose whether you want to support a party that is looking to help you as best as possible, or if you choose one of the other parties, I'm sure they think they want to help you as much as possible. But thank you so much for having us here, and thank you for coming out today.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for having us here today. And I want to let you know that 4 years ago, I was not involved in politics at all. And then something happened. Justin Trudeau got elected and started making life more difficult and unaffordable for people in this community. Now, I can tell you through my experience that when I've dealt with individuals, when I've spoken to individuals, they've told me day to day that they are finding it harder and harder and harder to make ends meet. Now, I'm also probably the only candidate up here that has had the opportunity to sit with multiple political parties who have asked me to run for them. That means I had the opportunity to review what those parties would do for our community. And there's a reason that I chose the Conservative Party of Canada. And it's because it is the party with the best platform to help people right here in Sault Ste. Marie get ahead. And how are we going to do that? We're going to reduce your taxes, everyone's taxes, not just the rich and wealthy. Our tax cut is in the very bottom tax bracket, the lowest tax bracket, to ensure that everyone receives a tax break. We're going to do our first act to repeal the carbon tax, to reduce that cost on everyone. We're going to introduce a green home tax credit, and we're going to remove the GST from your home heating. Because we recognize that we can have a government that lives within its means and puts more money back in your pockets. So the question is, where does that money come from? And the answer is simple. We're not going to give millions and millions of dollars to large corporations like our counterparts in the Liberal Party are. We're not going to pay $12 million to Loblaws to buy new fridges. We're not going to give $256 million to the Asian Infrastructure Bank to build pipelines and bridges in China. We're going to keep that money here in our community because we recognize we can balance the budget responsibly without cutting services to individuals in our communities day to day, and I am fully committed to that because I will work every day tirelessly for everyone in this community because I have done that my entire life.
By cutting carbon taxes, it's actually a carbon fee and dividend system. The only people that benefit from cutting that is fossil fuel corporations and large emitters. It doesn't benefit people, young people who want a future without significant climate change. It doesn't benefit individuals right now because a lot of people actually get more money from the fee and dividend than they lose from paying 4 extra cents on gas. So I guess something else I wanted to mention is the quote, a poor country is not one in which the poor people can afford a car. It's a country in which the rich take public transit. And the reason that I feel that's so relevant here is because it's, again, an issue of climate. It's an issue of resources that everyone can use, as opposed to resources that you need huge amount of investment for corporations to benefit from. And in addition, we have to help everyone on the ground level. Trickle-down economics does not work. We know that because they came for unions first, and they came for benefits and for wages. So by addressing all of those holes that trickle-down economics has created, we can grow as a country instead of growing huge corporations. Thank you.
Again, thank you very much. It's great to be back here once again. I truly appreciate the questions, and just reminded of being here about a year ago when we did the National Senior Strategy, and we've implemented a lot of your recommendations, but there's more work to be done. And I always wanted to be reminded of the fact that we're about investing. Over the last 4 years, we made improvements to the guaranteed income supplement, to the old age security, the Canada Pension Plan, but we're not done. We're going to further boost those, because I've heard for too long, under the Harper government for 10 years, you did not receive the proper amount of money. And so not only are we catching up, we're going to surpass that over time. We introduced the middle class tax cuts that everyone talks about. Well, seniors are the middle class, and those working hard to join it. In our platform, we are going to make sure that no tax is paid on the first $15,000 of income, which is going to help out immensely for a lot of people in this community. We're committed to seniors, we're committed to this community. I think of the work that was undertaken by this community in Canada as we stood up to Donald Trump on those unfair and unjust tariffs on steel. That's 8,000 pensioners that would be affected if the steel plants were negatively put down. We stood with them as they went through restructuring. That's 40% of our economy. It's absolutely critical to us. And we're going to continue that fight. And I've got lots of fight left in me, and I'm going to make sure we fight for our fair share. We've got $250 million in investments in this community over the last 4 years on a number of items, including things for seniors. The New Horizons program, which is making investments here at the Senior Center, up at the YMCA, to improve the quality of life. That's absolutely critical. And I can tell you that I really appreciate your questions. On healthcare, yes, we're stepping into it. When the province advocates its role, we're going to be there.
Thank you. The People's Party of Canada believes in respect, responsibility, fairness, and freedom. And these are 4 extremely valuable and important words when it comes to running Canada. When we are all here in front of you, you are our employers and we are your employee. And you vote us in and we work for you. It's very important for Canada right now to balance the budget. And you hear that a lot, but it's true. Because Canada is at a tipping point right now. We are right now using tax dollars that are borrowed, and it's costing our grandchildren this tax money. They'll be paying for what we just spent in the last 4 years for the next 30. We need to get out of this hole that we're in. We need to build our economy up and get our country strong again. So balancing the budget is a must, and it's responsible, and we are going to do it in 2 years. The People's Party Canada will do it in 2 years. The Conservatives want to balance the budget as well, but in 5 years, after they're already done their 4-year term. How convenient. Right? And we believe in having more money in your pocket, like dropping the carbon tax. We are going to drop the carbon tax immediately, and the Conservative Party will do it in 2022. I'm not sure what they're hanging on to there on that one. Also, we want all waterways to be clean and safe for drinking and swimming in. We are also going to do that immediately. So there's a lot of people and politicians talking words and empty promises, and a lot of people don't even want to vote out there because they're tired of hearing all these broken promises. But I want everybody to know that People's Party of Canada is refreshing. It's common sense, and it's for all of Canadians, not just minorities. It's here for you. It's here to build our country up strong. All of our candidates, we're all different anyways. Look into our platform. I'll talk to everybody after. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for your orderly presentation here today. I want to thank you on behalf of everybody here, for your commitment. I don't think people often appreciate what you folks are giving up and what you are giving and your commitment. I know that you work every day from early morning till late at night during the campaigns, and God help you if you get elected. I hope that we give thanks to whichever one of these candidates is elected, because it is often a thankless job. So we really, really appreciate your being here and giving us the liberty of choice. I'd like to thank the panelists too for their devising these questions and for your role in organizing today's meeting. The three associations have done a fine job, and I know I came into it late, but I know that they have been working long and hard and very thoughtfully. So thank you very much. And we have volunteers who have given time today to help organize. They are due thanks. And most of all, I think I want to thank the audience for coming out. You take this seriously. I'm satisfied that if you're here today, you're going to vote if you haven't already. And finally, I thank the Seniors Drop-In Center for accommodating us and for helping us with the refreshments after. This is a very busy place. You know that, I'm sure, better than I do, but this is where a lot happens. So thank you all. So you are welcome, and in fact, I hope you will stay and take the opportunity to talk to our candidates and socialize a bit. Thank you so much.